Picture this: 1 week before the biggest deadline of my life, my brother Soren grabbed my laptop, the heart of 18 months of grueling research, and smashed it to pieces. The screen shattered, my code vanished, and my future seemed to crack with it. But the worst part? When I ran to my parents, holding the broken remains of my dreams, they laughed. They laughed, as if my work, my passion, my entire world meant nothing. That moment felt like a knife in my back, twisted by the people who should have had my trust. I'm Eloan Harris, 29 years old, a computer science grad student at the University of Michigan. For nearly 2 years, I poured my soul into a master's thesis, an algorithm designed to predict heart disease, to save lives through lines of code. It wasn't just a project, it was my chance to make a mark, to prove I could change the world. But to my family, it was just computer stuff, a footnote to my brother Soren's endless spotlight. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the nerd with her nose in math books, while Soren, the charming football star, soaked up all the attention. My achievements? They were barely acknowledged. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most? Ever been betrayed by the ones you thought would always stand by you? I know that pain too well. This story isn't just about a broken laptop. It's about what happens when the people you love most try to tear you down, and how you rise stronger from the ashes. In the days that followed that betrayal, I fought against impossible odds. I rebuilt my thesis from scratch in 6 sleepless days, fueled by coffee and a fire I didn't know I had. I faced my brother in court, demanding justice for what he'd done. And I stood on a graduation stage, proving them all wrong. This is a story of heartbreak, resilience, and a victory I earned through sheer will. If you've ever faced family drama, if you've ever had to claw your way back from someone else's cruelty, this is for you. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and let's dive into this journey together. You'll see how a single act of destruction became the spark that lit my greatest triumph. Stick with me, you won't believe where this story leads. I grew up in a quiet Michigan suburb, where life revolved around manicured lawns, Friday night football games, and family dinners that always felt a little lopsided. My name is Eloan Harris, and at 29, I'm looking back on a childhood that shaped me in ways I'm still unraveling. My younger brother, Soren, for years my junior at 25, was the golden child of our family. He had this effortless charm, a wide grin, and a knack for stealing the spotlight without even trying. A high school football star, Soren could do no wrong in the eyes of our parents, Marjorie and Elton Harris. They were at every game, cheering from the bleachers, their faces glowing with pride as he scored touchdowns. His trophies lined our living room mantel, each one a testament to his place at the center of their world. Me? I was the quiet one, the kid who'd rather solve math problems than toss a football. I spent my evenings hunched over graph paper, scribbling equations, while Soren was out with friends, his laughter echoing through the house. My parents never quite knew what to make of me. They'd nod politely when I showed them my report cards, straight A's in math and science, but their eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, Eloan," they'd say, before turning the conversation back to Soren's latest game or his weekend plans. It wasn't that they didn't love me, they did, in their way, but love and attention aren't the same thing. I'll never forget the day I was 12, standing in our kitchen, clutching a certificate from a statewide math competition. I'd won first place, beating out hundreds of kids, my heart swelling with pride. I thought, maybe this time, they'd see me. But when I handed the certificate to my mom, Marjorie, she glanced at it and said, "Why can't you be more outgoing like Soren? People like a kid who can light up a room." My dad, Elton, just chuckled and went back to reading the sports section. That moment planted a seed of self-doubt deep inside me, one that whispered I'd never be enough, no matter how hard I tried. Soren dropped out of college after 1 semester, landing a job at our uncle's construction firm, but to my parents, he was still the star. They left my college graduation early to attend his frat party, a memory that still stings like a paper cut. But I found my place in the world of numbers and code. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Michigan for computer science, a chance to build something bigger than myself. By 29, I was deep into my master's program, working on a thesis that felt like my life's purpose. My project was an algorithm to predict early markers of heart disease, a piece of code that could catch warning signs before they turned deadly. It wasn't just a degree to me, it was a chance to save lives, to make a dent in the world through logic and precision. My thesis advisor, Professor Diana Martinez, saw something in me that my family never did. She'd sit with me in her cluttered office, poring over my code, her eyes lighting up. "Eloan, this is groundbreaking," she'd say. "This could change healthcare." Those words kept me going through late nights in the lab, when the glow of my laptop was my only company. I'd sacrificed a lot for this thesis. A tech startup had offered me a stable job with a good salary, the kind of offer most grads would jump at. But I turned it down. I believed in my work, in the lives it could touch. When I told my parents about the decision, they didn't get it. My mom tilted her head and said, "That sounds awfully foolish, Eloan. Why risk everything for some school project?" My dad just shrugged, already distracted by Soren's latest story about a night out. To them, my thesis was just a hurdle, not a dream. They didn't see the hours I'd poured into it, the way each line of code felt like a step towards something meaningful. Professor Martinez's belief in me was a lifeline, a reminder that my work mattered, even if my family couldn't see it. That disconnect with my family wasn't new, it had been simmering for years. My achievements were like whispers in a house full of shouts for Soren. When I won a departmental award for my thesis proposal, I called home, hoping they'd be proud. My mom listened for about 10 seconds before saying, "That's great, honey, but did you hear Soren's dating someone new?" My dad asked if the award came with money, and when I said it was just recognition, he sighed, like I'd let him down. I tried explaining my research once, how it could predict heart disease and save thousands of lives. But halfway through, my mom cut me off to talk about Soren's new truck, paid for with his construction job earnings. It wasn't just that they didn't understand my work, they didn't try. To them, my computer stuff was a quirky hobby, not a career or a calling. Soren, with his easy charisma and endless parties, was the one they bragged about to neighbors. "Our son's got such a big personality," they'd say, while I was just the smart one, a label that felt more like a cage than a compliment. I'd learned to swallow the hurt, to keep my head down and focus on my goals. But as my thesis deadline loomed, I needed their support more than ever. I went home for spring break, hoping for a quiet space to finish my work. I had no idea that decision would lead to the worst betrayal of my life, a moment that would test everything I thought I knew about myself and my family. It was spring break, and I'd come home to my parents' house in our quiet Michigan suburb, hoping for a sanctuary to finish my master's thesis. I was 29, a computer science grad student at the University of Michigan, and my deadline was just 1 week away. 18 months of research, countless late nights, every ounce of my heart and mind had gone into crafting an algorithm that could predict heart disease and save lives. All I needed was a quiet space to polish the final draft, to make sure every line of code was perfect. I'd spoken to my parents, Marjorie and Elton, before I arrived, explaining how critical this moment was. "Please," I'd said, "I just need a few days of peace." They nodded, assuring me the house would be calm, that they understood. But my brother Soren had other plans. At 25, he was the same charming, reckless former football star he'd always been, living for the moment and thriving in chaos. While I was setting up my workspace in my old bedroom, surrounded by faded math posters and color-coded notes, Soren was downstairs, planning a party. His friends, Holden and Gideon, showed up early, their voices booming through the house, beer cans already in hand by noon. I tried to block it out, slipping in my earbuds, turning up my study playlist, focusing on the complex equations on my screen. But the music from downstairs grew louder, the bass vibrating through the floorboards, shaking my concentration. I went to the living room, where Soren was sprawled on the couch, laughing with his friends. "Soren," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm begging you for just a few hours of silence. My thesis is due next week, and I can't work with this noise." He smirked, that familiar, careless grin spreading across his face, the one that always got him out of trouble. "Relax, Eloan," he said, rolling his eyes. "It's spring break. No one should be doing homework." I bit back my frustration. "This isn't homework. It's my future." But he just shrugged, turned the music louder, and waved me off like I was an annoyance. His friends chuckled, and I felt that old, familiar sting of being invisible in my own home. I retreated upstairs, telling myself I could push through, that I had to. By mid-afternoon, the party was in full swing. Laughter, shouting, the clink of bottles, it was a wall of noise I couldn't escape. I was deep into a critical section of my algorithm, the kind of work where a single misplaced variable could unravel everything, when my bedroom door slammed open. Soren stood there, his face flushed from drinking, Holden and Gideon behind him, their eyes glinting with amusement. He didn't knock, didn't care that I was working. "Still at it, huh?" he slurred, leaning against the doorframe, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's so important about your little computer project, Eloan? Saving the world or something?" I pulled out my earbuds, my heart pounding. "Soren, please," I said, trying to stay calm. "I need to finish this. Just leave me alone for a few hours." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound, and stepped closer, looming over my desk. Holden smirked, picking up one of my academic awards from the shelf, twirling it carelessly. "Nerd stuff," he muttered. I felt my stomach twist, but I kept my eyes on Soren. "It's not just a project," I said, my voice trembling now. "It's an algorithm that could help doctors catch heart disease early. It matters." His face darkened, and for a moment, I saw something raw in his eyes, anger, maybe resentment. Later, Holden told me the truth. Soren had overheard our parents bragging to a neighbor about my thesis, calling me the smart one, something they'd never said about him. That praise, rare as it was, had eaten at him, fueling a jealousy I never knew existed. But in that moment, I didn't understand why he was so angry. He leaned over my desk, his breath heavy with beer, and stared at my laptop screen, filled with lines of code and equations. "This," he spat, "this is more important than family?" Before I could answer, he grabbed my laptop, yanking the power cord from the wall. Papers scattered to the floor. "Soren, no!" I screamed, lunging toward him. But he held it above his head, out of reach, his grin cruel. "Let's see how much this really matters," he said. And then, with deliberate force, he slammed my laptop onto the hardwood floor. The sickening crack of breaking plastic and glass filled the room. But he wasn't done. He brought his foot down hard, stomping on the screen, shattering it into a mess of wires and jagged edges. I dropped to my knees, a cry escaping my throat, as I stared at the wreckage of 18 months of work. "Why?" I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Why would you do this?" Soren just shrugged, his momentary rage fading into indifference. "It's just a computer," he said. "Get over it." I gathered the broken pieces of my laptop, my hands shaking, and ran downstairs, my heart pounding with a mix of panic and desperate hope. My parents were in the kitchen, Marjorie arranging snacks for Soren's party, Elton mixing drinks, both of them oblivious to the chaos upstairs. "Mom, Dad," I gasped, holding up the mangled laptop, its screen dangling by wires, keys scattered like broken teeth. Soren destroyed my laptop. All my thesis work, 18 months of research, it's gone. He did it on purpose. Marjorie barely looked up from her platter of cheese and crackers. She sighed, that tired, familiar sound she used when she thought I was being dramatic. "Oh, Eloan, you're too sensitive," she said, brushing me off. "I'm sure he didn't mean to break it that badly." I stared at her, disbelief choking my words. "He slammed it on the floor and stomped on it," I said, my voice rising. "It's due in a week. This is my future." My dad, Elton, glanced at the laptop, then reached for another bottle of mixer, chuckling softly. "Well, maybe you weren't meant for this degree," he said, as if my life's work was a minor inconvenience. "These things happen. You should have backed it up." I stood there, clutching the remains of my thesis, my world collapsing around me, and they acted like it was nothing. I wanted to scream, to make them understand the gravity of what had just happened. But then I overheard Marjorie whisper to Elton, "She'll get over it. Soren's just being Soren." My heart sank further. I learned later they'd encouraged his party, told him to invite his friends to cheer him up after a tough week at work, completely ignoring my plea for a quiet space. They didn't just dismiss my pain, they enabled the destruction that caused it. Soren appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his friends hanging back, their laughter fading as they sensed the weight of what he'd done. It was an accident, he lied, his voice smooth, confident no one would challenge him. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything, to hold him accountable. But Marjorie just smiled at Soren, handing him a plate of snacks, and Elton clapped him on the shoulder, joking about the game on TV. In that moment, I realized I was alone. The family I'd hoped would protect me saw my dreams as disposable, my pain as an overreaction. I turned and walked upstairs, the broken laptop heavy in my arms, feeling a crack inside me far deeper than the shattered screen. I stood in my childhood bedroom, clutching the broken pieces of my laptop, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and despair. 18 months of research, my algorithm to predict heart disease, my entire future, it felt like it had been shattered along with the screen. My parents' laughter still echoed in my ears, their dismissal cutting deeper than Soren's act of destruction. I knew I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by people who saw my dreams as a joke. I had to get out, to find a place where I could breathe, where I could fight for myself. So, I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with whatever I could carry, notebooks, a change of clothes, my phone, and left without saying goodbye. The door slammed behind me, a sound that felt final, like I was closing a chapter I'd never wanted to write. I called my friend Nora, my voice shaking as I explained what happened. "Can I crash at your place?" I asked, barely holding back tears. Nora didn't hesitate. "Come now," she said, her voice steady and warm. "We'll figure this out." Her apartment was a small, cluttered haven in Ann Arbor, just a few miles from the University of Michigan, but it felt like a lifeline. When I arrived, she wrapped me in a hug, and for the first time that day, I felt seen. I collapsed onto her couch, the weight of the betrayal sinking in, and told her everything, Soren's cruelty, my parents' indifference, the deadline looming just 6 days away. Nora listened, her eyes fierce with empathy, and then she said something that changed everything. "You're not alone, Eloan. We're going to fix this." Those words were a spark in the darkness. I called my thesis advisor, Professor Diana Martinez, expecting to hear disappointment or doubt. Instead, her voice was calm, resolute. "This is a setback, not the end," she said. "You have access to the Advanced Algorithms Lab, 24/7, starting now. Get here." Her belief in me, so unwavering when my own family's was non-existent, was like a rope pulling me out of a pit. Someone finally saw my pain, believed in my work, and gave me a chance to fight back. I left Nora's apartment that night, my resolve hardening, and headed to the lab, ready to rebuild what Soren had tried to destroy. The Advanced Algorithms Lab became my world for the next 6 days. It was a stark, fluorescent-lit room filled with humming computers and whiteboards covered in equations, but to me, it was a battleground. I had to recreate my thesis, an algorithm to detect early heart disease markers, from nearly nothing. My laptop was gone, and with it, the latest optimizations I'd spent months perfecting. I set up on a lab computer, my hands trembling as I logged in, the deadline ticking like a bomb in my mind. I worked 16-hour days, fueled by vending machine coffee and sheer desperation. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I caught naps on a cot in the corner, waking every few hours to check my code. Raj, an IT specialist from the university, was a godsend. He spent hours analyzing the wreckage of my laptop, salvaging 80% of my files from the hard drive. It was a miracle, but it wasn't enough. The critical optimizations, the ones that made my algorithm faster and more accurate, were lost. I had to rebuild them from memory, piecing together fragments of equations I'd scribbled in notebooks, trying to recapture the logic that had taken months to refine. Every line of code felt like a step through quicksand, my mind racing against time, fueled by the fear of failure. That fear wasn't just about the deadline. It was deeper, more primal. What if my parents were right? What if I wasn't meant for this? Nightmares haunted the little sleep I got, visions of standing before my thesis committee, my slides blank, their faces blank with disappointment. In one dream, I saw myself failing, my algorithm useless, lives lost because I couldn't deliver. But then, another dream came, vivid and unshakable. I saw a patient, an older woman with kind eyes, smiling at me from a hospital bed, her life saved because my algorithm caught her heart condition early. That image burned into me, a reminder of why I'd started this work, why I couldn't give up. It wasn't just about a degree, it was about the people I could help, the lives I could touch. Each day blurred into the next, my world narrowing to lines of code, error messages, and the hum of the lab's cooling fans. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, my fingers ached from typing, but I kept going. The stakes were too high to stop. I wasn't just rebuilding my thesis, I was rebuilding my belief in myself, proving to that 12-year-old girl who won a math competition that she was enough, even if her family couldn't see it. The deadline loomed closer, but so did the faint outline of hope, a chance that I could pull this off. I wasn't alone in that lab, and that made all the difference. Nora showed up every day, bringing clean clothes, sandwiches, and an unwavering belief in me. She'd sit quietly in the corner, reading or working on her own projects, her presence a steady anchor. "You've got this, Eloan," she'd say, her voice cutting through my self-doubt like a beacon. One day, she brought her cousin Lennox, a software engineer at Tech Fusion, the company I'd dreamed of working for. Lennox didn't just offer sympathy, he rolled up his sleeves and dove into my code. "Your algorithm's structure is solid," he said, his eyes scanning my work. "Let's make it faster." His expertise helped me optimize sections I'd thought were lost, shaving precious seconds off the processing time. Lennox wasn't just a tech wizard, he understood my pain. Over coffee one night, he shared his own story. His family had wanted him to be a doctor, but he chose engineering, a decision that led to years of estrangement. "They called me a failure for following my passion," he said, his voice low. "But I built a life I'm proud of. You will too." His words hit me hard, a reminder that family doesn't always define your worth. Our shared defiance of expectations forged a bond, and his technical help gave me a fighting chance. 3 classmates from my seminar group, Jasper, Lila, and Theo, heard about what happened and showed up the next day, sacrificing their spring break to help. They debugged code, cross-checked equations, and kept me grounded when I felt like I was drowning. Jasper would crack quiet jokes to lighten the mood, Lila brought playlists to keep us awake, Theo double-checked my math with a precision that rivaled mine. "We're not letting you do this alone," Lila said one night, handing me a coffee. Their presence was a gift, a chosen family that filled the void my own had left. They gave me strength when my family wouldn't. Ezekiel Harris, Eloan's brother, had tried to take everything from me, but these people gave it back. While I worked, another fight was brewing, one that wasn't about code but justice. I wasn't going to let Soren's actions slide. This wasn't just about a broken laptop, it was about my worth, my right to be respected. I started gathering evidence for a small claims case against him. I took photos of the shattered laptop, its screen cracked, keys scattered like broken dreams. I saved emails from Professor Martinez confirming the importance of my work, proof of the damage done. Raj provided a technical assessment, estimating the cost of the laptop and the data loss. Every piece of evidence was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. Late at night, between coding sessions, I researched small claims court procedures, filling out forms with meticulous care. I wasn't sure if I'd win, but I had to try. The process was exhausting, documenting every detail, calculating the hours lost, the emotional toll, but it was necessary. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for the principle that my work mattered, that I mattered. Each form I filled out felt like a declaration, I am not invisible. My family might not see my value, but I would make sure the world did. As the deadline approached, the lab became a fortress of determination. Nora, Lennox, and my classmates worked alongside me, their support a shield against the pain of betrayal. I was rebuilding more than my thesis, I was rebuilding my sense of self, proving to myself that I was stronger than the people who tried to break me. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I could win. 6 days after Soren smashed my laptop, I stood in the Advanced Algorithms lab at the University of Michigan, my heart pounding as I stared at the screen. My thesis, a 157-page document detailing an algorithm to predict heart disease, was complete. I'd rebuilt it from the wreckage of betrayal, piecing together every line of code, every equation, through sleepless nights and sheer willpower. My fingers hovered over the submit button, trembling with a mix of exhaustion and hope. This wasn't just about meeting a deadline, it was about proving to myself that I could rise above my family's dismissal, that my work mattered, that I mattered. I clicked send, and a wave of relief washed over me, mingled with a quiet pride I hadn't felt in years. I sent the file to my advisor, Professor Diana Martinez, expecting her to point out flaws or missing pieces. Instead, she called me into her office the next day, her face lit with a rare smile. "Eloan," she said, her voice warm, "this is better than your original draft. The clarity, the precision, it's sharper, more focused. You didn't just rebuild your thesis, you refined it, and in doing so, you refined yourself." Her words hit me like a lifeline, echoing the belief she'd shown me when my family offered none. I'd poured everything into those pages, every late night, every moment of doubt, every spark of determination, and hearing her praise felt like a validation of my entire journey. I thought back to the 12-year-old girl who won a math competition, only to have her mother say she should be more like Soren. That girl had carried self-doubt for years, but in that moment, she was gone. I'd rewritten her story, not just my thesis. The algorithm wasn't perfect yet, but it was mine, built from scratch under impossible odds. It was a testament to what I could do when I refused to let betrayal define me. As I left Martinez's office, I felt a weight lift, not just from the submission but from years of feeling invisible. I was ready for what came next, whatever it might be. The fight wasn't over, though. Soren's actions weren't just a moment of drunken rage, they were an attack on my worth, and I wasn't going to let them slide. I'd filed a small claims case against him, not for revenge but for justice, for the principle that my work deserved respect. Standing in the courtroom, a small, sterile room that smelled of old wood and paperwork, I felt exposed but resolute. I presented my evidence, photos of the shattered laptop, its screen cracked like a broken promise, emails from Professor Martinez confirming the thesis's importance, Raj's assessment valuing the laptop and lost data at $3,800. My voice was steady as I explained the toll, hours lost, dreams nearly destroyed. Soren sat across from me, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a nervous fidgeting I'd never seen before. Holden, one of his friends from the party, testified reluctantly, his words damning. Soren was angry, he said, avoiding my brother's eyes. He'd heard your parents call you the smart one to a neighbor. He hated it. That revelation stung, a glimpse into the jealousy that drove Soren to destroy my work. When it was his turn to speak, Soren's voice was low, almost broken. I hated hearing Mom and Dad call you the smart one, he admitted. It felt like I was nothing to them. His words were a confession, raw and unexpected, but they didn't erase the damage. I looked at him, my brother, the golden child who'd always had our parents' favor, and felt a mix of anger and pity. I forgive you, Soren, I said, my voice calm but firm, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'll let this go. You need to take responsibility. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me $3,800 for damages. It wasn't just about the money, it was about setting boundaries, about saying my dreams weren't disposable. My parents, sitting in the back, were silent, their faces unreadable. For the first time, I didn't care what they thought. I'd stood up for myself, and that was enough. A month later, I walked across the graduation stage at the University of Michigan, my cap slightly askew, my heart full. I graduated with distinction, my thesis earning praise from the entire computer science department. Professor Martinez hugged me afterward, whispering, "You've done something extraordinary, Eloan." That moment, standing in my gown, surrounded by classmates who'd become my chosen family, felt like a victory over every doubt my parents had planted. Soren's actions, Marjorie and Elton's laughter, they hadn't stopped me. I'd proven them wrong, not with anger, but with resilience. The triumph didn't end there. Tech Fusion, a leading tech company, offered me a job before I'd even taken off my cap. They'd heard about my algorithm, seen its potential to revolutionize healthcare, and wanted me on their team. I accepted, moving to a new city, a new life, where my work could make a real difference. Within months, my algorithm was implemented in hospitals, catching heart disease early, saving lives just as I'd dreamed. One day, a letter arrived from a patient, a woman named Clara, whose heart condition was detected because of my code. "I'm alive because of you," she wrote, her words trembling on the page. I read that letter over and over, tears blurring the ink, feeling the weight of my purpose settle into place. That wasn't the end of my journey, though, it was a beginning. I started mentoring younger students, especially those who felt unseen or doubted by their families. I'd sit with them in coffee shops, sharing my story, Soren's betrayal, my parents' dismissal, the 6 days of relentless work that rebuilt my thesis and my confidence. "Your worth isn't defined by those who can't see it," I'd tell them, watching their eyes light up with recognition. One student, a shy coder named Mia, told me my story inspired her to keep going despite her parents' pressure to quit. Helping her, and others like her, felt like closing a circle, turning my pain into a beacon for someone else. My family remained distant. Marjorie sent a stiff congratulatory text. Elton didn't mention the graduation at all. Soren called once, mumbling an apology, but I kept my boundaries firm. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd built a life surrounded by people who valued me, Nora, Lennox, my classmates, Professor Martinez. They were my chosen family, the ones who lifted me when my own family let me fall. As I sat in my new office at Tech Fusion, watching my algorithm save lives, I realized something profound. Soren's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had shown me my strength, my ability to rise above, to create a future bigger than the one they'd tried to take away. 6 days after my world seemed to shatter with my laptop, I stood in the Advanced Algorithms lab at the University of Michigan, my heart hammering in my chest. I was 29, a computer science grad student, and I'd just finished rebuilding my master's thesis, a 157-page document, every line of code and equation a testament to my refusal to break. My algorithm, designed to predict heart disease and save lives, had been destroyed by my brother Soren, his act of jealousy leaving 18 months of work in pieces. But I'd fought back, working 16-hour days, fueled by desperation and a fire I didn't know I had. As I stared at the computer screen, the submit button glowed like a beacon. This wasn't just about meeting a deadline, it was about proving that my family's betrayal couldn't define me, that my dreams were worth fighting for. My fingers trembled as I clicked send, and a rush of relief flooded through me, mixed with a quiet, hard-won pride. I'd done it. Against all odds, I'd rebuilt what they tried to destroy. I sent the file to my thesis advisor, Professor Diana Martinez, expecting her to point out flaws, to see the cracks in a work pieced together under such pressure. The next day, she called me to her office, a small space overflowing with books and handwritten notes. When I walked in, her eyes held a warmth I hadn't seen before. "Eloan," she said, her voice steady and full of conviction, "this thesis is remarkable. It's not just a reconstruction, it's sharper, clearer, more precise than your original. You didn't just rebuild your work, you refined it, and in doing so, you refined yourself." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from years of doubt sown by my family's indifference. She saw what my parents, Marjorie and Elton, never could, the value of my effort, the strength it took to keep going when everything seemed lost. I thought back to the 12-year-old girl who'd won a statewide math competition, clutching her certificate, hoping for her parents' pride. Instead, Marjorie had said, "Why can't you be more outgoing like Soren?" That moment had planted a seed of self-doubt, a voice whispering I'd never be enough. But standing there, hearing Martinez's praise, I realized that girl was gone. I'd rewritten her story, not just my thesis. The algorithm wasn't perfect, but it was mine, forged in a crucible of exhaustion and resilience. It was proof that I could rise above betrayal, that my worth didn't depend on their approval. As I left Martinez's office, a weight lifted, not just the burden of the deadline, but years of feeling unseen. I'd proven them wrong, and more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I was enough. The fight for my thesis was only half the battle. Soren's actions weren't a fleeting moment of recklessness, they were a deliberate attack on my dreams, and I wasn't going to let them pass without consequence. I'd filed a small claims case against him, not for vengeance, but for justice, for the principle that my work deserved respect. Standing in the courtroom, a small, stuffy room that smelled of polished wood and old paper, I felt exposed but determined. I was 29, facing my 25-year-old brother, the golden child who'd always had our parents' favor. I laid out my evidence with precision, photos of the shattered laptop, its screen cracked like a broken promise, emails from Professor Martinez detailing the thesis's importance, a technical assessment from Raj, the IT specialist, valuing the laptop and lost data at $3,800. My voice was steady as I described the toll, hours lost, dreams nearly crushed, a deadline I'd barely met. Soren sat across from me, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous fidgeting I'd never seen. Holden, one of his friends from that awful night, took the stand, his voice low, reluctant. "Soren was angry," he said, avoiding my brother's gaze. "He'd overheard your parents bragging about Eloan's thesis to a neighbor, calling her the smart one. It ate at him." That revelation was a knife to my heart, not just Soren's jealousy, but the fact that my parents' rare praise for me had sparked his rage. When Soren spoke, his voice was quiet, almost broken. "I hated hearing Mom and Dad call you the smart one," he admitted, his eyes on the floor. It felt like I was nothing to them. His confession hit me hard, a mix of anger and unexpected pity. I saw the boy he'd been, always basking in our parents' attention, now grappling with his own insecurities. But his pain didn't excuse his actions. I looked at him, my brother, and said, "Soren, I forgive you, because holding on to anger won't help me heal. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll let this slide. You need to own what you did." The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me $3,800 for damages. It wasn't just about the money, it was about setting boundaries, about declaring that my work, my worth, wasn't disposable. My parents sat in the back, silent, their faces unreadable. For the first time, I didn't need their approval. I'd stood up for myself, and that victory was mine alone. A month later, I walked across the graduation stage at the University of Michigan, my cap slightly crooked, my heart full to bursting. I graduated with distinction, my thesis earning praise from the entire computer science department. Professor Martinez pulled me aside after the ceremony, her eyes shining. "You've done something extraordinary, Eloan," she whispered, hugging me tightly. That moment, surrounded by classmates who'd become my chosen family, Nora, Jasper, Lila, Theo, was a triumph over every doubt my parents had planted. Soren's destruction, Marjorie and Elton's laughter, they hadn't stopped me. I'd proven them wrong, not with bitterness, but with resilience, with a thesis rebuilt from ashes into something stronger. The victory didn't end with graduation. Tech Fusion, a leading tech company, offered me a job before I'd even taken off my gown. They'd seen the potential in my algorithm, its ability to transform healthcare, and they wanted me to help bring it to life. I accepted, moving to a new city, stepping into a future I'd built myself. Within months, my algorithm was implemented in hospitals, catching heart disease early, saving lives just as I'd dreamed. One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten and trembling with emotion. It was from Clara, a patient whose heart condition was detected because of my code. "I'm alive because of you," she wrote. "I get to see my grandchildren grow up." I read those words through tears, clutching the letter, feeling the weight of my purpose settle into place. Each life saved felt like a victory over the doubts my family had sown. I'd turned their laughter into a legacy of impact. But the real transformation came in giving back. I started mentoring younger students, especially those who felt invisible, doubted by their families or their own fears. I'd meet them in coffee shops, sharing my story, Soren's betrayal, my parents' dismissal, the 6 days that rebuilt my thesis and my confidence. "Your worth isn't defined by those who can't see it," I'd tell them, watching their faces light up with hope. One student, Mia, a quiet coder with dreams bigger than her small town, told me my story gave her the courage to keep going despite her parents' pressure to quit. Helping her, and others like her, felt like closing a circle, turning my pain into a beacon for someone else's path. My family stayed at a distance. Marjorie sent a curt congratulatory text. Elton didn't acknowledge my graduation. Soren called once, his apology half-hearted, but I held my boundaries firm. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd built a life surrounded by people who saw me, Nora, Lennox, my classmates, Professor Martinez. They were my chosen family, the ones who lifted me when my own let me fall. Sitting in my office at Tech Fusion, watching my algorithm save lives, I realized Soren's betrayal hadn't broken me, it had revealed my strength. I'd risen above, not just to survive, but to create a future far greater than the one they tried to take away. Looking back, I see that moment, Soren smashing my laptop, my parents' laughter echoing in the kitchen, not as the end, but as the beginning of who I am today. I'm Eloan Harris, 29, a computer science graduate who turned betrayal into triumph. Soren broke my laptop, 18 months of my thesis reduced to shattered glass and twisted metal, but he couldn't break my spirit. My parents, Marjorie and Elton, dismissed my dreams as if they were nothing, but their indifference didn't define my worth. I learned a truth that's carried me forward: my value doesn't depend on my family's approval. It comes from within, from the fire I found to keep going when everything seemed lost. Those 6 days in the lab, rebuilding my algorithm to predict heart disease, were more than a race against a deadline. They were a reclamation of myself. With every line of code, I silenced the doubts planted years ago, when my mother told me to be more like Soren, when my father chuckled at my pain. I proved to myself that I was enough, that my dreams were worth fighting for. But I didn't do it alone. Nora, my friend who opened her home, Lennox, who shared his own story of defiance, my classmates, who gave up their spring break, Professor Martinez, who believed in me when my family didn't. They became my chosen family. They lifted me higher than the family I was born into ever could, showing me that the people who truly see you are the ones who matter most. That journey taught me something profound. Setbacks don't define you, but how you respond to them does. Soren's jealousy, my parents' laughter, they were obstacles, not endings. I'm writing a book now, pouring my story onto the page to help others stand up for their dreams, to show them that pain can be a catalyst for strength. I want to reach the quiet kids, the ones who feel invisible, the ones whose families don't see their light. I want them to know they can rise, just as I did, not by seeking approval from those who withhold it, but by building a life that reflects their own worth. This isn't just my story, it's a call to anyone who's ever been doubted, to keep pushing, to find their own chosen family, to create a future brighter than the shadows cast by others. So, I'm asking you, have you ever fought for a dream that others tried to tear down? Maybe it was a family who didn't believe in you, a parent who laughed at your passion, or a sibling who made you feel small. Maybe it was your own doubts, whispering that you weren't enough. Whatever your story, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and your words might just inspire someone else. This journey, from a broken laptop to a life-changing algorithm, from betrayal to triumph, is proof that you can overcome the odds, no matter how steep they seem. If my story resonates with you, hit that like button to let me know. Subscribe and tap the bell for more stories of resilience, of people who turn pain into power, just like I did. I've got a challenge for you. Join my #AloansTriumph challenge. This week, take one step toward a goal someone doubted, a project, a dream, a piece of yourself you've held back. Maybe it's writing that first chapter, signing up for a class, or having a tough conversation. Whatever it is, take that step, and tag me with #AloansTriumph to share your progress. I'll be cheering you on, because I know what it's like to feel unseen, to fight for something no one else believes in. Your step could be the start of your own triumph, a moment where you prove to yourself that you're stronger than the doubts others try to place on you. This isn't the end of my story, it's a beginning. At Tech Fusion, I'm saving lives with my algorithm, mentoring students, and writing a book to share this journey. But the real victory is knowing I don't need my family's approval to shine. Soren's actions, my parents' laughter, they didn't break me, they showed me my strength. You have that strength too, waiting to be unleashed. So share your story, take that step, and let's rise together. Your worth is yours to claim, and no one can take that away.